Scott's a fantastic trumpeter and a really great educator, so without further ado, Scott Wendholt.
Mike. I'm jealous of you all, actually. When I live in New York, and I stay very busy there, and I play a lot of jazz and good music of all kinds, but these week-long camps that I used to teach, you know, at the Averson, so here in Louisville, it was the opportunity to just do jazz and think about and listen to only jazz for an entire week and be surrounded with like-minded educators and and students. So hope you're all enjoying that as much as I did enjoy it. And I used to go to the camps as a kid, actually, when they were in the Averson camps used to be in Greeley, Colorado. I'm from Colorado, so that was my first introduction to kind of even learning anything about music theory, which I know you guys are making some strides throughout the week, no matter what level you're at, right? I was telling the trumpet, we already had a master class earlier. I was telling them that when I did my first camp, I was a pretty good player, but an ear player, and everything was just going way up. I was in the beginning theory class, but in the top combo, I believe. So there was kind of a disparity right there, and I remember even learning that I didn't know jazz terminology yet. So it was the first time I could kind of put some labels on this stuff that I was experiencing, kind of just naturally through my ear. So it was a really beneficial thing to my growth. I've been in New York about, it's 35 years now. It's 34 years, and I play in a ton of big bands, including the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra, which now exists as the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra. Some of you may have heard that one, of that band, or heard us. Hopefully, has anyone heard that band live? At the club in New York, possibly, the Vanguard? Great. So if you get a chance to ever swing by there, I'll be there every Monday unless I'm out doing something else, I suppose. But I'm 59, that means they've been there for 58 years. So longest running jazz gig in the world, in the history of jazz, I guess you'd say. So I enjoy doing that a lot, even when I do my more normal gigs, or the general business, we might call it. I play on a Broadway show right now called Moulin Rouge. You've probably heard of that, or the movie, you just might have seen it. So I cover a lot of bases. I teach at Manhattan School of Music. I think I've been there 10 years now, roughly. And I have about, I should know this, but I think 6 CDs as a leader, and probably played on, I don't know, a couple hundred other jazz CDs. So just to give you an idea where I'm coming from. When I do these talks, and this is, I know we've got every level of player here, I try to think of things that are, you know, going to be a little bit unique that you might not have heard. Now it's going to be impossible, you're going to have heard some of this stuff. But as I was telling, in trumpets and brass, you have to bear with me as I repeat some things that I think are really important. But I see some people taking notes, even, you know, so you'll get different stuff down this time, maybe. I asked this question, I asked a bunch of questions, but one that I asked was one that I wish dawned on me at a younger age. I kind of got there, I did get there, but it took me a long time to realize it. And it's this notion of being able to play linear music, you know, so play a good line. Usually that's eighth notes. I mean, it can be other things than eighth notes, right? But that's a lot of what we do. So being able to play a good line that goes somewhere harmonically over whatever the harmonic thing is that we're dealing with, but that often, that's a 2-5-1, right? Everyone knows what a 2-5-1 is by this part of the week, right? So, or maybe, hopefully before that. So I asked my guys the question, and I don't know the answer for sure, but I have an idea of what I think it is. It's how many 2-5-1s do I have to learn to become a really good improviser? And I think the answer is, there's a couple details to it, but I think the answer is it's just a handful. But you really have to really know them in all keys at any tempo, meaning as fast as you can play them. Once you have that handful, which grows out of, backing up just a little bit, grows out of really kind of mastering your major scale, your Dorian minor scale, and your Mixolydian / bebop scale, both those. Mastering those three first. So what does that mean? To me, it means being able to simply play them up and down for an octave. And I know that's not necessarily the definition of mastering something, but that's what I mean by at least having a notion of what the scale feels like. So it's not really being managed anymore. It's just something that you start. Like if I think about the easiest scale, the B-flat concert scale that I played in band and in my life, maybe 1 billion times by now or whatever. If I can get everything closer to that level, that's what I mean by mastering. So just being able to play the scale. So if you start with those 3 scales, that leads you to being able to play on a major 2-5-1. Now there's minor 2-5-1s too. We'll have to work on them later too. And you'll need a handful of those too, but the handful is a little smaller, to be honest. So this handful that I'm talking about has to be something that you light the fuse and it burns by itself till it's finished, right? Then once you're able to do that with that handful, you sort of light this fuse, and in the middle you kind of go to this fuse, and then you do something really creative maybe here, but you're thinking quite less than you were before as you're trying to say, oh, what's the next note I have to play? We can't think that way when we're on stage, right? So, who agrees with me that, and you can be like, I'd like to hear what the educators, that are great educators in this room, you think I'm on the right track with the handful of 2-5-1s? Yeah, I'm seeing hands go up. Because here's what happens. We spend that time doing something that's very boring. On a trumpet, it's very hard because the trumpet's a non-symmetrical instrument. If your instrument is laid out a little bit better, like piano or bass or guitar, even saxophone, trombone's pretty hard too, I think. Trumpet's very hard. But as we spend that time getting them to be something that we could, I like to say, if I were to wake you up in the middle of the night and hand you your instrument and say, right in the middle of your REM sleep, you're really tired, and say, play your B-flat major scale. You'd probably go, okay, can I go back to bed, right? You wouldn't take much thought, right? You know it so well, you played it so many times, it's just a gesture, it's a feeling. So, the more things we can get to that point where we almost don't have to think about them, our CPU is very low to play the B-flat major scale because we played it so many times in band, right? So if I get my 2-5-1s, my handful of those to that level, through that arduous work, then I'm able to be free on a higher level again at the end. But you kind of have to take that leap of faith because you know practicing all the scales to make them something like that speed is no fun. So if you have your eye on the prize, and if you know that that handful is attainable with, well, it might be hundreds of hours of cumulative practice, but it's going to be, the payoff is huge. They're super useful. There was a time in college where I spent months working on this lick that goes, it's fourths and major triads. And I got it so it's, it took a lot of work. And I remember Ralph Bowen, the great tenor saxophone player who was also at Indiana University, walking by my practice room. I was so proud of myself because he opened the door and he said, "Hey man, that's cool, what is that?" I said, "Come on." He showed it to him and he immediately got it, you know. And then he said, "Oh, so where do you use that? Where do you play that?" And I was like, I don't know. And to his credit, he said, oh, cool, and walked out the door. And probably mastered it that evening because he, no joke, he used to practice 10, 12 hours a day. He would stay there at night. He was a maniac about it. But that got me thinking about what I was doing. I was doing something because I wanted to sound like Woody Shaw. So that's valid. That's a good thing to go for. And I knew that it was a virtuosic kind of thing to do on trumpet too, because I got it faster. It felt good to be able to play it. And I do still use that lick about this often. Where the other stuff, and I spent months getting that. Was it worth my time? Mm-hmm. It was still worth all that time, even though I played it this much. But this other stuff I'm talking about, the major 2/5 ones, and the minor 2/5 ones, which you kind of start working on after you get good at the major 2/5 ones, I use it all the time, every day, all day. So it's a high payoff. Whatever the price, I guess, in hours of learning it is, it's definitely worth it. Or if you say, no, it's not, then, you might be doing the wrong thing, or you're not going after that high of a level or something. Does that make sense? It should certainly say, well, even if it costs me that many hours, I gotta have it. So trust me on that one. If I would have heard that at a younger age, I would have progressed more quickly because I was so scared that there were so many that I would need to know. That it almost turned me off to start working on any, because the mountain was so high, I just didn't even want to start climbing it. But if I saw the hill was only this high, I'm apt to try it. So, I don't know, I somehow got it together just by happenstance over the years, but I think I would have loved to have heard that. So, take that to heart. Who has, now I asked who agreed, and I liked the hands that went up. Who of the students here feels like they already have that in their arsenal? Anyone? Okay, so I'm saying the right thing. And think about it this way too.
Question is, Scott, so when you say a handful of 2/5 you mean a handful of pads, right?
Yeah, so this is what I mean. Oh yeah, good question. Like, should be more specific. That's my first one. I remember working on it. And it's perfect, right? I mean, is it the best 2/5 ever? I don't know, probably not. But it is elegant. It is perfect. It means, by that I mean the voice leading it's there. It makes me feel the gesture again of 2/5-1. It should feel like even to the novice listener that doesn't know that they're experiencing that tension and release, they are. And for us in the know, us musicians, we even know. Ooh. That's why we go, ooh, ah. Sometimes. I mean, I rarely do that, but in my mind, I kind of do that when I hear Kenny Dorham play the perfect 2/5-1. So if that's my first one, which it is, my second one is, it's similarly easy and perfect. I might not be able to play it quite as fast as I was singing at the end, but the faster the better. I don't know what the best tempo is. This is as fast as you can get it, right? So I rarely get to, I don't know, my key of F sharp. There's not a whole lot of tunes that go there, but there are some. And when they do go there at a fast tempo, I have enough stuff to throw at them. Am I going to be as facile as I would be in some of the easier, more common keys? The answer is no. I could endeavor to get F sharp or C sharp for me even more facile, yeah, even better. And I was telling this to my people earlier, I will if I find that I need to. But so far, I'm able to I have enough to say on that particular sound. I can't be as expressive, I'll grant you that. Would I be a better player if I could? Yeah, but I need to spend time on other things too. So those two that I just sang to you are, I'd say elegant and perfect. But they have no alterations yet on the 5-chord or on, we want to be able to start altering either the 2-chord or the 5-chord. We can alter the 1-chord too if we want to, but that one's not as important to me. Also, let me mention that the way I was singing those, I'm doing nothing on the 1-chord. You can hear that? I just stay on a note. The first one I sang goes to the root really nicely. The second one I sang goes to the 3rd of the major chord really nicely. So when I'm learning them, I like to practice them like this, where you go to the 1 chord, then turn that into the 2 chord, so turn that major chord into the same root with the minor sound. So I get 6 of them as I go down, which happens a lot in music anyway. And then I've got to get the other 6, so I have to go up a half step or whatever, start on a different note that will get me the other 6, right? So I'm doing nothing on the 1 chord for a while, until I get pretty darn good at it and fast. Then I allow myself to practice it with, it comes naturally, I don't allow myself, but you can phrase it that way. So, because I know I've got a lot to say on a major chord. I know my major scales really well. So then I'll add that. So again, with my CPU analogy, you're kind of you have to think a little harder, especially at first. When you get real good, the CPU stays pretty darn low the whole time. That's the idea. That's where creativity comes. If we're up here and have no headroom, we're not going to be creative because we're like, we're struggling just to kind of get it all out. So when we get the dexterity, the facility, the virtuosity to play it easily, the CPU comes down and we start listening, then we can look around and we can react to things, and it gets creative again. So the part of the brain that's not so good on me is I'm a very analytical person, but in terms of music, I'm very intuitive. So the artistic side, the creative side is very active. The other one, I had to kind of, I'm not so good at like buckling down and learning things. So that's the one I had to, you guys, Tom Walsh was here yesterday, right? Fantastic player. We were freshmen at the same time. Well, we went through all of college together, 4 years at least. We're the exact same age coming in as freshmen. And I remember this idea that I was getting, just starting to think about it at the time. Because I remember thinking, David Baker was showing us things to do, and I'm like, oh man, I'm good at this. Oh, I'm doing good. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm better than this guy, Tom Walsh, at doing that. I must be better than him. I don't know, it wasn't like bragging to myself. It was just kind of a feeling of where I'm at. And then we did something totally different. David said, okay, now start on the 7 and then walk down to whatever it was. He gave us instructions on what to do. And then I'm like, and this guy, everything just came flowing out. He could really do that side of the brain, or I don't know, both sides of the brain are working all the time. But it was kind of interesting that he had that ability to like conceptualize it immediately and go after it, where I was like, ooh, no, if I can't hear it and if I've never done it, it's just not going to come out. Some of that's because the trumpet's harder than the alto sax in terms of that. I think playing something for the first time because of the asymmetry of our, what instrument is yours? Tenor. So tenor is at least symmetrically, usually you're going up and down.
It's linear, right?
What's that?
It's linear.
Yeah, it's more linear certainly than the trumpet's just a weird one. So so maybe that was an advantage that Tom had, but it doesn't really matter. The idea being that I was realizing, wait a minute, hold your horses, big shot. You've got some stuff to be able to work on to be able to do that. It was the same with an experience that I had that I shared with a bunch of you earlier, where Don Braden, the great tenor player, and I were playing together a lot in New York. And I was thinking, oh, okay, he's a pretty good sight reader, but you know, we're gonna have to run it a couple more times for melodies and linear things. But he was nailing the changes that I would bring in on my charts immediately, better than me. So he had that skill of being able to look at the changes and know how they were supposed to come out, or had the ability to do that, where I had to spend a lot of time. I was good at the single line thing, but not so much at the multitasking that you do kind of with chord changes. Does that make sense? So, let me see. Oh, I was kind of, a good question. So those are my first two pretty cool, no alterations. Then my next one that I think I learned, I don't know if it was this order, but roughly. So that has more tension and release in it. And that has a bunch of alterations because it made me learn the diminished scale, which starts with a half step, that diminished scale. So like if you see C7 flat 9, that's the sound that you're going to play. Listen, I'll share this with you too. Maybe some people it'll resonate with. But I was so confused when I was that younger person. But even in college, I would see C7 flat 9, and I'd be like, okay, so it's a C7 scale. That's Mixolydian, and I can play the flat 9. I was missing somehow, and it was my fault. I'm sure David Baker talked about it flawlessly. But I didn't even realize that C7 flat 9 was shorthand for all the other alterations that exist in that chord. It's just we don't, as musicians, we don't want to see too much information. We just want it to be more economical, right? So that diminished scale who knows all of the diminished scales? What are there? 3 of those, right? Four of those scales, right? Who knows all those scales?
I'm familiar with them.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I know them.
Okay, so knowing them again, yeah.
I play them, I still gotta read them.
Good way to put it. Yeah, knowing them in the middle of the night when I hand you your trumpet. Well, that's the final.
Absolutely.
But that's, you got to start somewhere. We all do. So that scale really opened my ears up, opened my world up with alterations. And then I would listen to music that I had already heard a bunch of times, and I'd go, there it is again. Oh man, again. You know how it is when you learn a new word, especially when you're younger, but at any age. And before the internet, you could Google it now, but you'd say maybe, hey, Mom, Dad, what's ubiquitous mean? And they'd say, oh, it means ever present, something that happens a lot, it's everywhere. Oh, okay, thanks. And then a day or 2 later, you hear it again on a television commercial or on the news or something. Ah, there's that word again. And you think to yourself, how was I surviving all these years without knowing? Because every time it just went like this, right? The truth of it, though, is we do that all the time when we read a book. We don't get every word, but we kind of get the gist of it, and it would be just so arduous to have to Google it every time to figure out. Now, there are words you should Google and figure out what the heck they mean, but well, you get the idea. So it's natural that things work that way, I guess. So as I learned that new scale or any of these new licks, even Baba do that really kind of simple bebop lick, when I learned that, again, there it is again. There it is. So when you learn one of these, any new language, parts of your new language, and that could be French or German, or in this case jazz, then you say, now I'm hearing it all over the place. So that's what it did when I learned that diminished scale, and allowed me to add finally one of my handful of 2-5-1s that had this. And then some tritone substitutions came way later in life when I was teaching a student. I said, check out this Kenny Dorham lick. Oh, it's so perfect. It's a perfect 2-5-1. He said, yeah, that's the best tritone sub I've ever heard. And I was like, is that what I guess it is. I don't think of it that way. But then I started to say, you know what? I haven't practiced a 2-5-1 because I moved past that, so to speak, when I was younger. And then I said to myself, wait a minute, I'm going to learn this perfect. So much harder one to learn than my three that I sang for you earlier. So I found myself adding to that handful, and you know, that one is so hip, and I don't know it in every key fast. That's a mea culpa, you know, I should. But I know it in enough keys that are common that I play it just fine. And that one I'll play whole cloth, just the whole thing. I'll rip it right out, Kenny Dorham, and feel no shame about it because it's just perfect. And that's kind of what we do. We all know that, you know, this is a shared experience, a shared language. You use your own taste to not play a whole solo of Freddie Hubbard or Kenny Dorham because that wouldn't be cool, really, probably. But I would go as far as playing a whole lick like that. Right, so when you get that handful, you start mixing and matching, and you know, I'm not going to play at the concert. I might play that line, but it'll sound more like this to you guys, hopefully. So I'll put a little turn in it, I'll put some musicality into it, I'll put some rhythm on it. It sounds better. But at first, when I'm practicing it, it's or whatever the lick is. But in the case of that one, I keep it really simple, and then later I start dressing it up a little bit and making it feel better. Let's see. What else do I want? Where do I want to go from there? The next scale. Who has a vote? And I asked this earlier. So trumpets, or earlier master class, you don't get to opine. If we agree maybe that major is the most useful scale, then Dorian minor is the second most useful scale in jazz, and that Mixolydian might be the third most useful. See it all the time, hear it all the time. What must the next scale? What might the next sound, chord, or scale be? Any ideas?
Blues.
Hmm?
Blues, yeah.
Oh, blues. Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's hard to categorize that one. We learned it so early that it might even be more useful than the major scale. I mean, it's kind of that one I'm not sure where to put it. And I'll tell you this, I don't even know my blues scales in all keys nearly as well as I do in B flat and F, maybe D flat, seems like I'm in a lot. But yeah, blues would fit somewhere. What else did I hear? Melodic minor is a pretty good guess. I think it comes a little bit later. I don't know for sure. You would have to really have AI figure it out. You know, I say do your thesis, somebody, on that. How many of these chord changes appear or are heard on tunes? And I think you'd come up with major being the most. So I think this might be, but I'm not sure. I think the next one would probably be maybe Locrian, half diminished sound. And I think close to that might be the diminished one I was talking about, the one you play over a 5-chord, not the fully diminished scale that starts with the whole step is cool too, but it's not nearly as useful in a way as the one that starts with the half step. But they're similar animals, so we kind of learn both of them at the same time. Just like D, Dorian minor, feels a lot like C major, so that's good for us. Even on trumpet, we get that. You know, what's your instrument?
Guitar.
Guitar. Yeah, so you got all. Yeah. I tell this joke. Yeah, you walk by a guitar player's practice room or even a tenor saxophone, and it's just their patterns, nonstop. Well, it's an easier instrument physically to play. You know, trumpet, you guitar, but also these symmetrical instruments. I just feel like the instrument's saying, "Yep, yeah, keep doing that. Oh, this is good. Yeah, ooh, the interaction with it is good." The trumpet, you start doing things in different keys, or the Woody Shaw like I was singing earlier. The trumpet says, "Stop, please, don't. This hurts. Don't do this. Do something easier, please." So that's our axe to grind as trumpet players and maybe trombone players. Trombones. Who plays trombone in here? Not a whole lot of trombones. How symmetrical is it? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's some things, but if you go ba-ba-da in different keys, you're going to be doing all kinds of different things, right? So,
That's symmetrical.
Yeah, it's not. I think it's as bad as the trumpet in that. Bad, I don't know. It's similar.
You could think in terms of harmonics.
What's that?
You could think in terms of tube lengths and harmonics and stuff like that.
Yeah, things that are counterintuitive, I guess. Yeah, thinking.
I don't think anybody can do that in calculus.
Yeah, so we, for those of us handicapped by our instrument a bit, we accept it or switch. That's the way it is. But at least it's a fair playing field. All my trumpet playing friends, all of us, have to do the same thing, and that's what makes it almost a camaraderie within the trumpet community, kind of like, yep. And we're not going to get, even if we practice longer and harder, because we do have to, we're still not going to get as good as Michael Brecker is that instrument. Yeah, Michael Brecker, I think, was a trumpet player. He'd still be excellent, but he wouldn't achieve the same things as he could on the tenor saxophone. So, I think it's the Locrian, and I think it doesn't kind of doesn't matter. We do have to learn all of our jazz scales finally. I'm just interested in knowing which ones have the big payoff in terms of usefulness, right? Because I'm a practical person. Yes, I did learn all my whole tone scales too, and I use them about even smaller than that. Woody Shaw, yeah, I'm glad I know it, but it's more of a boutique kind of scale that doesn't get used near as often. Does everyone buy that? Make sense? I didn't say this earlier today. If we could think in terms of a finite amount of time, let's just say even a year. I'm meeting some of you for the first time, and if I run into you, if I'm here next year, or you come to the Vanguard in a year, and you say, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I was at your talk, and I just wanted to let you know, I did add a handful of 2-5-1s, and I couldn't do that at all, as you might recall. None of us raised our hands in all 12 keys, and now I can. I would say, wow, was it worth it? And you'd say, oh, you better believe it. I use it all the time. Thank you for your advice. It's really easy to see me in a year, and I said, wait a minute, or you introduce yourself again. I said, so, hey, well, did you do it? And not really. I mean, a little bit, but I've been working on learning tunes and, my chops and my high notes and my facility. And the first answer is way better, is all I'm saying. Just to have, like, a fun. I mean, that's obvious, right? A duh. But it's really easy for me or anyone to let, I don't know, let's say a short amount of time so it feels like it still makes sense. Like 3 months. And if someone were to say, what have you learned in the last 3 months? And if I say, I don't know, I can't. What is it that you can do now that you couldn't do 3 months ago? There are times, especially as I get older, where I'll say, I don't think there's anything. I don't know, I haven't really been. So it's much better to be able to obviously say, 3 months ago, I wasn't able to play my diminished scales in all keys at any tempo really, and now I can. That's just these bites that we can take out of it, so to set those goals, which I never did, but I'm talking about what I think would help you, and I've seen it help my students who were able to be a little more disciplined than I was at the time. I always say I got there despite myself, I think in some ways. So yeah, that's like a main thing that I kind of wanted to say. A lot of that's common sense, but the part is that would have helped me a lot is, yes, it's the handful of 2-5-1s that will open the key. It's kind of the keys to this music is what I say. Even if you're playing on a modal tune, you're still going to be able to put 2-5-1s in there and apply them, right? We know that. Or, well, if you didn't know that, you can. What else to say? I was talking about this earlier in the trumpet master class, brass master class, and it was this notion about how learning tunes. I can't remember who asked, but if you got a new set of changes that are kind of hard, what do you actually Marlon? How do you learn hard tunes? And And that was something I would have liked to have heard people talking about earlier too, or this notion of really having to experience the sound of the changes over and over and playing on them. Whereas some people, I think Don Braden included, could just look at them and kind of conceptualize how they went. For me, I needed to get better at doing that, so trying to see what's a key center maker, where is this going? Maybe just try to be a little more intellectual about it as I was playing it, or looking at it for the first time, or as Don played it the first time, kind of seeing what's going on as I follow along and trying to hear what he was doing with it. But also realizing that my strong suit is the experience of the changes and what they feel like. And all tunes have things in common, but we're still able to drop the needle on something if we know the tune, and within like a couple measures, oh, it's stellar. Yep. It's weird to me that you can keep track of so many, let's call them programs or algorithms, you know, sets of chord changes where you go, oh, that going to that sound, going to there could only be Stella. And if you get it wrong, you say, if the next measure you're like, oh, no, it's not. It's really like Stella. Then you say, oh, it's a tune that's kind of like Stella, but I don't know it, or you find the right tune. But anyway, that idea of that we can do that, not have to hear the melody, right in the middle of the changes, and say, wait a minute, I can hear the top of the form. Oh, this has got to be. So realizing that whenever I did, or talking about it in these kind of situations, made me realize that that is really the way I compart art. Is the way I feel a tune. So if someone says, hey, can you write out the changes to Softly as in the Morning Sunrise, I probably get a napkin out or a piece of paper and get all that. I think that one, there's a lot that I can, but there's also a ton of tunes that I know really well, I've played a million times, that I still have to go, well, let's see, I guess it starts on a, and then let's see, this is what it does. So I don't know if that's good or bad. I wish I just knew everything, had a photographic memory, would be nice, I suppose. But I know that's the way I experience changes. And if I don't know enough about a tune, then I can't deal with it. And I'll say, no, I'm gonna have to pass, you guys play it all, or let's play something different. But if it's something that I have the confidence saying, oh yeah, I know the melody for sure, and I've heard that tune so many times. Why don't you solo first, maybe I'll say. And then I'll go, oh, yeah. Or even during the head melody, I'll be saying, oh, okay, yeah. Various like kind of sounds, gestures in my head, thinking about now it's going to do something. I think it goes down by no, I have stuff. Okay, I'm hearing these things or experiencing them as I take the first solo, or maybe I haven't heard it all on the first person solo. So I try something. I try to give it some kind of label if I can. And like I'm saying, like that thing, I think it's about to go to, no, it goes to minor. Geez, okay, that's right. It sounds like it's going to go major, but it goes minor, or vice versa. So those simple things that, tunes, many other tunes share parts of each other, right? But this one, that's like a computer program, but it's set up different to get you this different result. So looking at it that way, and I think, I don't know, this is the first time I thought about it this way, but I bet a computer programmer sees a mathematic equation on the, if anyone knows the answer, just tell me if I'm right. You can look at it and say, oh yeah, you don't have to say what, okay, you don't even have to look at the little parts of it, you just say, oh, I know what that feels like, looking at that. That gives you a certain output that will show you exponential growth. I don't know enough about computers to say, but I think it's a similar thing. So if I know that's the case for me, I will endeavor to make a play along. And see, I started with play alongs with Jamie's stuff and Music -1, and started playing by ear. I told you guys that, and then kind of filled in the rest as I went along. But it's still my strong suit. So if I've got a record date with Don Braden, he might not have to do this, but I'm going to say, for your tune, I'm going to make a little play on. Or, I didn't say this earlier, but you know, most people are sending charts that have, you know, you get the MP3, you get the PDF, you get a MIDI file perhaps, or an MP3 of the MIDI track. So you don't have to make your own, but if not, and old school, a lot of the record dates I did was before computers were that popular. I would sit down and come up with a track that I could play along so I could learn it, so I could get the feeling of it, so I could play it 12 times, 100 times, whatever I had time for, so I could be ready for that record date. I might even in the process be memorizing the tune, maybe not, but if I did, great. No, this is a good story too. I work with this alto player, Vincent Herring. Raise your hand if you know that name. He's a great alto player, great friend of mine, but I don't know who's in his band now, but I don't play with him anymore. But for years I did, and I remember, he kind of auditioned me, and I came over to his house and played well, and he said, yeah, okay, man, we got some gigs coming up. He said, it was on the phone, he said, just learn. I don't just think he said learn. We're going to be playing the music from, and he named 2 or 3 albums. And I said, okay, cool. And he said, yeah, we'll memorize everything, no music on stage. And I said, okay, I haven't done that in a while, but I can do that. So I bought the CDs and just learned them all by ear. I don't think I wrote anything down. I didn't transcribe them. I just kind of was able to hear where they were, and my ears were good. Played along with them dozens and dozens of times till I memorized them and knew the changes then. And then I came to that first rehearsal, sound check, whatever it was before a gig, and he handed me the charts. And I was like, oh, I didn't know there was a book. And now he would just in PDFs, like on the computer, but he would have had to mail them, and it must have been a little ways before the gig, and he said, yeah, here's the book of everything. I was like, oh, would have been nice to know. I didn't say any of that. I just said, oh, thanks. I think I got everything now. Really? Got everything? I think so. And then I would look at some of the charts and see the chord change and go, oh, I was thinking of that. Oh, okay, the same thing pretty much. But I was calling it the wrong thing, I guess, but getting kind of the same result. It's like if I play something by ear, well, if it's super hard, maybe I won't be able to get it, maybe I sound bad. But if it's something sort of what I like to call pedestrian, like a standard tune, it's not too crazy where it's going. Pedestrian chords, that means majors, minors, dominants, Locrians, some altered chords probably, maybe a Phrygian, I don't know, it could have anything. But if I'm playing it by ear, which I'm willing to do, the kind of tune where I say, I've heard that tune enough, let's try it. If it's a jam session, if it's a concert, I'll say no. But I start trying to say to myself, what am I doing? Because I start playing the right notes in the case of the song I'm talking about. And then my next thing is to say, what is this that I'm doing? What is it? What am I feeling? Okay, that's C major actually, I think. Now if I say C major, it feels like, and it's actually D Dorian minor, it's not a terrible mistake. It's a pretty good label is what I'm saying. It's the wrong label, it's the wrong root. But I'll play a lot of right notes, and hopefully at some point then I'll go, oh wait a minute. It doesn't feel happy, it feels sad, damn it. It's D minor, okay, got it. And I'll still play mostly the same notes, but I'll treat it a little bit differently maybe as I get the perfect label, right? So as I looked at Vincent's music, sometimes I go, oh, I kind of had the wrong label. I had a good label, it was a working label, but I had the wrong root, or, oh, okay, that is a sus chord, but it's just written differently or something. So that's another really important thing, and this idea of playing totally by ear. Does anyone ever do that? Just turn on something and not know it, have never even heard it, or maybe a play along that they don't have the change. It's like an Aebersold play along. They don't have the book too, which is almost impossible now because you find it easily. But does anyone do that ever or regularly? Oh, that's good. That's a lot of hands going on. That's super good. I mean, at Manhattan School of Music, where I teach, I think I said that earlier, I some good students, but sometimes I'll just throw on a track and say, play immediately. And I don't care if you play wrong notes, but I don't want you to. Try to find the right ones. And play consonantly. I don't want to hear much dissonance, even though I like that in music. But I don't want to hear chromaticism yet. Try to play more and down the pike. And see how quickly you can do that while not poking really at it. Play music. Try to play a good line. I don't care if the wrong notes come out, so please do not either. But try to push it in the way of finding a label. So I might hear all the notes, I think they've got it, and I think all the notes were played on that scale, or certainly a lot of them. And so I'll stop and I'll say, hey, what is that? You playing? Sometimes they just say it, you know, but often they'll say, I'm not sure, let's see. Play it again. I said, man, you're playing all the right notes. We just have to get some kind of a label on it instead of saying, okay, cool, I'll just wait till the next chord now and deal with that. And then then we circle back on the next chorus, and it's the same process again. You start from scratch unless you said, oh, that's C sus, it's D sus, that's whatever it is. So this notion of trying to put a label, because then when I get a label that I think is correct, I play the whole darn scale, every note. And if I get a clunker, I know that I'm not quite there yet. And this is all happening in real time, so there's a lot. And some tunes I can't do it on. And when I do the ear training with my students, it's stuff that the sounds are pretty pedestrian, and they last long enough that you can digest them and give a shot at getting it right. And also maybe the form is easier to hear. That's kind of the requisite. If your ears get as good as Herbie Hancock's, I suppose you could play anything by ear, any kind of hard tune. Now he's going to play wrong notes too if he just dives in like I'm asking, but he's going to quickly be able to, even on a non-pedestrian, this is my idea of how I think Herbie would deal with it, or many great pianists especially, but musicians period, I think could deal with really complex tunes. And there's the idea of perfect pitch, which I don't have, which could also help in this endeavor. But for those of you that didn't put your hands up, do that, or even get together with a willing accompanist and have them feed sounds to you until you get them. And again, there's no notion of not going like poking at it kind of. Instead, so there's going to be mistakes still, but kind of trying to keep something a little bit lyrical or interesting, compelling. What does it mean when somebody goes to a concert and they hear Sonny Rollins, and then they hear somebody who's a very good high school player, but not as good as Sonny Rollins yet. And they're both playing tenor saxophone, let's say. And this person claps their head off after, I just said his name, Sonny Rollins. After Sonny Rollins, so this is my idea if you were to interview that person. You say, hey, are you a musician? Do you know what? No. The answer, no, I don't. Well, I noticed you really liked Mr. Rollins' solo and not Danny's so much. You know why? And you know, us in this room, we in this room, I should say, might say, oh man, did you hear like the rhythmic thing what he was doing? And I don't know, it's super sound and feel. What we could talk about certain things. I'm interested in the person who is a novice listener, but still is affected way more by Sonny Rollins than the more avid, the more average player. And if that person was just say, I don't know, I just liked it better. That just makes me, that's what I want, that's what I'm interested in. What are those things? They're hearing rhythmic things, but they don't really know that word, so they're not able to talk about it. They might even be experiencing harmonic tension and release that we could talk about. Oh man, that substitution, or he stayed on that note so long before he resolved it. We could talk about that. But this person doesn't know how to talk about those things, but is still moved by them. So that I'm kind of, follow me on this path a little bit as I veer off a little bit. But the idea of being deliberate about as many things as we can in this musical, ultimately. Those things I was talking about, like rhythmic development or even virtuosity. The guys, earlier I talked about these two umbrellas that I think exist in improvisation, right? And there's subcategories for both of them, but there's one over here that's bebop. It's linear. It's a lot of eighth notes probably, not necessarily only. It's about voice leading. It's understandable. If Clifford Brown was alive, and I'm alive, and I had one of the trumpet players come up from the camp here, and we said, hey, let's agree on a tune we all know really well. And maybe we'd say Joy Springs, so Clifford certainly knows that one. And I certainly know it, I'd make sure you did too. And then we'd say, okay, now let's do this game if you're willing to, guys. Let's only play eighth notes. That's the only thing we can use for interest or music. So no. That's musical stuff, but I'm talking about. So it wouldn't be the most musical thing in the world, but it could be very good. And if we took a vote at the end, this guy is going to win, Clifford Brown. I'm probably going to get second because I've been playing longer than most of you. And then someone's going to get third. Usually in music, that's not so interesting. It's like, well, whatever you like, man. But we could agree on that. It is not subjective, it's objective almost. You could say, no, that guy, even without his other spectacular things that he can do with sound and rhythm and lyricism, anything, we could still say, no, that was slicker, that had it just felt better. And Scott, yours was pretty good too. So there's something there, and that's what this umbrella represents to me. If I can get as good as Clifford as my archetype, but Freddie Hubbard was good, Kenny Dorham was good, trumpet players, it doesn't have to be a trumpet player either, but that's what I'm going for. I want to be as good as that. Will I be? Am I yet? No, but I'm still going to go for it. I understand how to get better at that, I have to practice. Then there's everything else underneath this umbrella over here. And that includes some of the words I said already, like lyricism, rhythmic development or usage, period, thematic things, just being more melodic, or even using vibrato, playing with a pretty sound, having a good style, having a good feel, being able to vary your feel, maybe even lean on things, pull back on things. There's a lot of categories in here. So one, you could even almost call it just as virtuoso-like as you can get on your instrument. That would certainly be under here. How do we get better at these things under here? Some of them are more understandable than others, but they're all a little more esoteric kind of to think about. We should certainly know more recordings that we can sing along with, listen more, right? We get better more at one with our instrument by practicing it more, by adding these scales and patterns that we do. We do work on our vibrato perhaps, or we work on pushing and pulling time. So some of them we can kind of talk about. Modal playing kind of would be under this umbrella too. So there's a lot to deal with here. Suffice it to say, this one over here, the bebop umbrella, is the one that kind of is a little more worth our time, if you will. This one's going to grow slowly. You almost have to have a lot of patience with this umbrella, right? And just wait for it to kind of get better by itself. That's the way I feel about it. Whereas this one can kind of be coached. You know, it can be, it can be understood, and you can catch up to Clifford Brown, or even pass it. Why not? I haven't yet, but I'm going to keep trying to see if I can. Does anyone agree with that? Anyone, or am I wrong? I never heard it talked about that way too, but it's just, in music there are not that many. There's no reason to have a whole lot of super concrete things. Just say, well, whatever you like. But I think everyone can agree that they would like to be able to do what this guy did, even if that isn't their ultimate stop on this journey, and they go somewhere different than where Clifford took it, which is probably what he would have done had he lived longer. He would have done things under this umbrella for the rest of his life too. So, what else? I'm going to see if there's any questions. I remember my dad saying to me, as I told him, hey, Maynard Ferguson's trumpet player is going to, I can't remember which one it was, is going to be at the high school today giving a little talk, so I'm going to go over there. And he said, oh man, ask him how much money he makes. and I said, Dad, Dad was just interested in what his son was getting into, as his son was getting more serious about playing the trumpet. But of course, I didn't ask that question. That's a tough one. But my point would be, I didn't ask any questions because I was just as scared too. And he was a good resource. He could have been. I mean, he was a good resource with things that he said. I'm sure they stuck with me. I don't know all of it. It's a long time ago. But I wish I would have availed myself of a professional such as him. So I'm here.
Okay, so I'm a drummer, and one of my favorite drummers is Billy Drummond, and I know that you recorded with Billy on quite a few
lot.
records. So what was it like playing with him?
Yeah, I still play with him a lot. I think the last gig we did was like a couple of weeks ago. Now I can't remember. Was it Dave Pietro's great alto player? Maybe it was Dave's quintet that I'm thinking of last time. I guess it doesn't matter that much, but it's great. For those of you who don't know Billy Drummond, get to know him, and you probably have heard him on something and don't know it. It's really easy to digest our music now with the title of the track. We don't even know the sidemen on it. Sometimes we do, and the irony is it's really easy to find out by Googling and going to another site and finding all music or somebody talking about it and find it all out. But we don't anyway, sometimes. I mean, sometimes we do, obviously, but that's an aside. Playing with Billy's great. He has so much energy, and he's so open when he's soloing, especially. Like if I'm playing with some drummers, I know exactly where I am, where they're going to set me up so well, I'm not worried. I'm still paying lots of attention and counting. It's my job. But when I played with Billy a lot, I'm really concentrating, and he's playing over the bar line. And sometimes it would be a little bit of a train wreck, or like, that's not a good word, as the train starts to lurch into going. It might feel like that a little bit sometimes. Usually it doesn't. Usually it works out fine. But you learn that that's okay with Billy. Or it has to be okay with you when you play with him. So there's a certain kind of recklessness that I like about his playing. He's a little more of a risk taker. He's super well listened. He knows so much music. He has 3 high-end super expensive stereo systems. He's really vinyl and even good CDs too, you know, but yeah, he's a great cat. You know, it's weird, when I met him, I think he was playing with Sonny Rollins at the time, doing some really good gigs, and I just remember someone saying, "Oh, this is Billy Drummond." I was, "Oh my God, dude." And he was like, "Yeah, let's play sometime." He's got kind of a higher voice. He said, "Yeah, let's play." And I was like, "No, you will play with me?" Because someone had said to me, "You've got to check this guy out." I mean, there was some kind of a reference. It's funny, you know, that's New York 35 years ago for me about, or 34 years, so how long had I been in New York? Maybe it's 33 years ago, I hadn't been there very long. But man, just putting yourself out into the scene, going out hearing music all the time, it's something I don't do anymore now that I'm older. When I had kids, that was an excuse not to, or now I'd play a Broadway show and tired and go home. But when I was really hungry and going out all the time was when I would run into one thing would lead to another. It was a very organic scene. It still is organic like that. I think the most organic city for jazz, you know, there's such a large scene. So yeah, one thing led to another and we played all the time. I told a Billy Drummond story at lunch today. It was a time, I was playing at Augie's Jazz Club. It's now Smoke Jazz Club. And it was a pass the hat situation, so we make on $30 each or something like this. Not very good. Of course, it was a while back, but Billy was starting to play with, you know, cats, you know, making some more money, doing better gigs. And I said, "Hey, do you want to play Augie's this coming Thursday or whatever?" I said, "Oh man, I'm trying to like hold out for $100, you know, like at least a gig for something like that. Man, I know that gig pays like $30." And so he said, "I'm gonna pass." I said, "Totally cool, I get you." And then, I don't know, soon after that he called back and he said, "I'll do it." You know, like I wanna play. So that's my little Billy Drummond anecdote. And all us musicians kind of go through that. "Ah, man, that's not enough. I wanna play." That's where the club owners have us. They know we love it so much that they say, "God, I can't pay you much. Give you a little free snack at the end or something." Yeah, back there.
In the New York scene, I know he's kind of slowed down. Have you worked much with Warren Bushey?
I have never worked with Warren. I love his playing. We were talking about him earlier today, and I don't have much of his recordings, but stuff I've heard on the radio.
He doesn't record much.
That's what we were talking about. That
You can't find, unless it's a YouTube, but he's so lyrical. He can just go chorus after chorus. He
Yeah.
can never run out of ideas.
yeah.
And there's something he has that I've not heard. He doesn't repeat himself, and he can take a standard and take a 5-minute solo, and you're still messing with
Yeah,
it.
I think he would do good at this game, you know, the Clifford Brown game. You know, I think he would do a fine job. Yeah. So yeah, I run into trumpet players all the time on big bands, and Warren doesn't really do that so much. So that's where I see 3 other people every time I'm in a new situation. And it's kind of an incestuous kind of scene. Like, I mean, the people who are good at doing the big band stuff are playing in this big band on Monday, and this, but you know, 2/3 of us are in the other band on Thursday or something. So Warren, I just don't run into him quite as much. Are you a trumpet player too?
I try to be.
Okay.
Have you ever sat in with Vince Giordano and the Nighthawks?
No. You know that I like that band too. It's kind of more traditional than I play a little bit. You know, those guys are like John Eric Kelso.
Yeah.
Yeah, like those guys. It's just like a little more trad than I'm capable of or like to play. A little bit of both. I mean, but I love it. You know, I love that music, and those guys that can do that, my hat goes off to them. And you know, even the older I get, I just want to hear good music. I mean, I think it was always the case, but as I do mature, man, I just appreciate anything that's for different reasons that's compelling. I like that word because interesting for some reason, you know, because it's beautiful, maybe it's intricate, maybe it's sophisticated, it's something. There's not a whole lot of adjectives, but it has to be compelling for some reason. So certainly those bands. Yeah.
Yeah, I had
it is making sense. So kind of the gist of the question is, and correct me if I'm not getting it, but is, well, okay, so I see this language that's going to fit, but how do you decide which one to choose from? Or so my best answer to that might be, I have to have them internalized and so memorized, meaning, as you heard, what's your instrument? Sax. Whatever the instrument is, I have to get it so internalized that, again, the CPU is down this low. Maybe some of those did get that way for you, but if they're anything short of just being a fuse that gets lit, it's not ready to come out in the music. So, also, you mentioned a bunch of them. So, for me, I get my handful, but even before that handful, I start with the one, and I own the one. Now, if I start on a second one before I'm really proficient at number one, okay, I'll give myself that. But I think it's better to kind of compartmentalize and say, no, I'm going to get this lick in every key perfectly and fast. Then I'm going to decide when I'm going to lay for it. Okay, here comes first note of the bridge. I'm starting this 2-5-1. And so it's still not musical yet. You know, I'm not back to being creative. I'm kind of headed that direction. But even that's hard, just to say, let me throw that switch, because over here, I'm being creative for the whole 2 A sections. Then I got to go, boom, back to the smart side of my brain, or the analytical side, and say, here's the thing, and now back to just whatever I want here. So the good player is constantly throwing the switch, but it's a skill that gets learned. So as I'm throwing the switch to that pre-packaged, pre-learned lick, I say I'm going to do it there. So for the Kenny Dorham one, it's hard. If I feel that coming in one of the keys that I know it in, here comes the bridge, it's going to be so good, it's going to be so good, and I play it. And then I get back to my other stuff, which is a little more inventive, or me, but he's part of me too, so that kind of works. I think if there's too many things, so I don't want to have too many goals. Like I want to maybe get this new thing I'm working on, like the Woody Shaw lick, or 2-5-1, let's stick with 2-5-1s. I'm going to say, when I get to the thing that's going to my F sharp, which is a tough key, I'm going to make sure I play in that hard key, because that's going to be a nice sounding lick, and better than playing just like, which I could also do, play an F major the whole time, more modally over it, which is a way to address it, but if I decide I want to play linearly, I might just lay for that one thing. Does that make sense? So if you have like one goal, and if I'm practicing it, not on the bandstand, but if I'm practicing it, I'll just play it over and over and say, every time I get to the bridge, or wherever it is, I'm going to insert it, and I'm going to see if I can get the switch flowing better. And I don't really look at it as that switch. When I just play it, it feels good that I can get it in. And then lo and behold, I may eventually I will, but maybe even soon, I'll make a mistake and turn it into something better even, or go on, I'll be playing that linear thing here, and then I'll find myself over here under this umbrella playing just in the right key center from there, or vice versa. I'm in the right key center, ooh, now I have this opportunity for this lick, oh, half of it, now I'm back here, you know, so the switch is kind of what I mean by these two umbrellas, two ways of playing. So it's patience and deliberateness. I'm thinking you might have just bit off more than you could chew when you have so many things that you're trying to get in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. But you're on the right track with the 2 5s, definitely. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about playing for a Broadway show? Do you get stuff out of it, or is it just really pedestrian and boring for you? Or is it...
Yeah, so the question is, how boring is it to play a Broadway show? Right? In a nutshell. I'll boil it down a little bit. It's pretty boring, but in a way, because you're supposed to play it exactly the same, and that can be a good thing. but it does lead to boredom, or I don't even know if that's the best word. Almost
Complacent.
boredom's too passive. I mean, it's hatred maybe sometimes. I mean, this is what I don't hate Broadway work because I know what it means. It pays well. There's a pension involved. I get health insurance, and it's also really good for my chops. As a trumpet player, I'm playing Moulin Rouge. It's like hard. It's high speed stuff. It keeps me in good shape for the gigs that I covet, jazz gigs. Whereas if I'm left to my own devices and not playing hard, well, warm up, so I'm diligent. I got to stay ready. I'm not. It keeps me at peak condition. So you got to take the good with the bad in that case. And I don't know. When I was younger, I used to think, I'd rather sub on Broadway because then you could be playing 3 different shows a week or 4, and that's more interesting. I'd rather do that. Now that I'm older, I hope this show runs till I retire. I mean, and it's good. Here's the thing. It's good music. It's like my part's very well orchestrated. It's all well orchestrated. My part fits in nicely. It's rewarding, and I do like playing that side of me, which is accurate and can play soaring high stuff when it is that, and so it's rewarding to me. It's something I always listen. When I was young, I had an issue with the identity of who am I as a musician, and I was getting things from people saying, "Man, what are you doing? Why are you playing Broadway? You should be the next great jazz trumpet player." And my real feeling was, no, I like what I'm doing. I understand what you're saying, and I hear that you probably wish that could have been a choice for you, and that's cool, I get that. But maybe I shouldn't be cool with it. So I was kind of like trying to figure out I knew what I felt, but maybe that was the wrong thing to feel. Maybe I should re-examine that. So I did for a long time till I don't know, a long time. It was a process though. I was kind of saying, wait a minute. This is what I like to do. And I am a jack of all trades, but I'm a master of all of them. Well, I don't know. I'm not a master of anything, but I try to be. I am very good at it, and I'm doing a lot of great jazz gigs. And then I like to come home and play the other thing, and have the other, the other benefits to that too. So that's something to think when you're bored.
How hard was the pandemic? What did you do?
Well, what did I do for the pandemic? It was utterly desperate. It was terrible. Yeah, I'd never collected unemployment in my life. I've always been a very busy musician and teacher. Both those things were cut off we all went through hard things, so it was really tough for us. We didn't get to start working on the phone or from home till really late when some Zoom stuff was done. And then I got divorced after 27 years of marriage, so because it was existential for my ex-wife, kind of like, well, am I happy? And I get it now. I mean, we're better off, both of us. But it was a strange time to say the least, and it was, when you're thinking, okay, I am good at auto mechanics. I do all my stuff. I'm good at electricity. I plumbed a lot. I'm good, really handy cat. But I'm also almost 60 at the time. We're closer to 55. Dude, I don't want to work for somebody at this age in a garage. I could own a garage maybe by 55, and that'd be okay. The younger people could break their backs, for a while, which I would have been doing it, where I had an auto mechanic in my 20s and 30s and 40s, whatever. So it was a crazy, crazy time, and we just didn't know if it would end, like everyone. But when it started, do you remember just thinking maybe, oh man, this thing might last like a month or so. Jeez, this looks serious. This looks bad, guys. We're gonna have to save some money, and then getting to like, okay. Thank God I had the Broadway work to collect unemployment off of, or else, yeah, I can't imagine would have had to deliver groceries. There was no Uber grab because of the pandemic. There wasn't much to do. But I would have had to find out something. Yeah, so. But here we are. So that's another perspective gatherer, right? As we complain about anything. Yeah, well, I got to go to my Broadway show again tonight. Oh, geez. Yeah, well, I swore to God I would never, ever think that way if I was working again. But sometimes I do. So that's human condition, part of it. So, yeah. How was it for you?
Well, fortunately, I was retired, so,
Good. Yeah.
but I remember somebody, I was in Times Square the week before everything shut down, and we bought theater tickets to see West Side Story,
Mm-hmm.
like a month out, thinking that it was all going to be over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a similar feeling about, yeah, the longevity of that darn thing. Yeah, it was tough on a lot of, for a lot of people. A lot of my friends, and I watched some people die from COVID. Wallace Roney died of COVID from early on. Jim Rotundi passed 1 week ago. Maybe a little bit due to COVID that he had a week before. I don't know. It was also heart issues. So it's hard to say if there was a causal relationship there. I mean, doctors may know the answer to that, or they may not. And it's kind of moot at this point. But to our talk about COVID, yeah, pretty devastating for the theater community, the arts community, and musicians. So, knock on wood that we're past the worst, but it's things can. Yeah. I try to I try to enjoy things more as I get older too. Which makes sense, right? I used to go to Paris all the time. And I just kind of lolled around in my hotel because I had a gig at night. And now I'll be in Paris my whole life. And I haven't been there in like 20 years, something. So when I go to places now, I try to soak it up a little more too. And I think that's just a maturity as you get older. But it's also COVID, giving a little bit of a perspective of one's fragility. So, yeah, so that's been a healthy thing for me. What else? Yes?
When you sub on Broadway, you film in cold or do you get your
Good question, yeah. Because I think years ago, decades ago, the question is, when you do sub on a Broadway show, do you go in and sight read it, or do you have to get the book together? It used to be years ago that you would maybe sight read a show. And then it became a thing where you would watch the book. We still do that, which means you don't get paid, but you put on your black clothes, or whatever the dress is, usually it's black clothes in a pit, because they don't want light reflecting up. And you sit hopefully next to the chair holder, or sometimes now, way over there, and it's not even that helpful to be there, but at least you learn where the bathroom is, and you know how to get to the stage. And then so when I started doing it, it had progressed to the point where, we'd take our cassette decks in and take the show ourselves, and sometimes you'd forget to, geez, I missed that section, I wasn't ready, or I didn't press play and record at the same time. Now it's different. When I learned my first show, I learned it so well, and I bought the cast recording, and I just took it so seriously and came in and did a great job. And I could just tell it was a cut above the average because what I was hearing. Wow, you really prepared, So now everyone prepares, or you're just cooked, So and now it's pretty easy to prepare, So I got a not a tape, but a recording of me playing the whole show, and it's edited so you can get to the next section if you want. You skip ahead. It's really easy to do that with the computer. Everything sounds perfect. They've come in, they've watched the book too. We've sent them, hopefully, an updated PDF for them to learn from. Sometimes the PDFs I get are perfect and up to date. Sometimes they're rotten. I'm not going to name any names, but it's really smart for the chair holder to do all the work, because you only do it once then. Instead of everyone having to be like, God, I printed it out, but I can't even really read it because it's all black. Can you get a better, but you know, you don't want to press too hard, and you think, well, everyone else is dealing with it too, so I will too. Or, oh, well, that one's actually in a different key. Oh, geez, now you tell me. I learned it in the lower key, okay? So I try to be clear. So we're very prepared when we go in. Shooting for a perfect first show, literally perfect, and it's probably going to be better than your fifth show, and when you start kind of easing off the gas a little bit, you start making some mistakes, and then after a while, you really do dumb things occasionally because you don't even know what you're doing. You're on autopilot, which generally works, but you know what I'm saying. So at the beginning, you're dialed in. So people take it super seriously now because it's such a coveted job. I get people contacting me every week or so and say, hey, do you need any subs? Or I'm new in town. So it's a tough game, but it's good. It's been good. So hey, I'm going to cut it off there. I think we're out of time. I've enjoyed talking with you. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you later. Thank you.
Scott Wendholt, give it up. Come on, you can do better than that.